official theory from the authorities was Alfred drowned.
Which I would argue makes the most sense. It really does. They lost him at the river. They were all at the river, and they can't find him there.
And I've got kind of a theory on why nothing was found. I'll get into that in a minute.
All right.
Ranger Mumaw was very disturbed by this disappearance and later wrote about it in a book called Recollections of a Rocky Mountain Ranger. He conducted somewhat of an experiment in which he filled a gunny sack with rags and enough stones to give it the weight of a small boy. He tossed the sack into the stream where the boy was last seen. He recounted that he had to run very fast to keep it in sight until it reached Fall River, and then it disappeared under an overhanging bank. He had workers on that section for days, and none of them could recover the sack.
So that was actually a pretty genius idea for the 30s of, like, let's see how the river's working and moving, and so the river's strong enough that it's carrying a sack that has rocks in it downstream.
Yeah.
That's pretty intense.
That's a pretty fast moving river. And, I think this is one of the first cases where I kind of agree with the official theory.
Yeah. And I'd argue that experiment alone kind of changed my mind.
One of the reasons why I think maybe nothing was found was, I think, a couple of reasons. So, when we talked to the chief search and rescue guy in Colorado in episode 3, he was kind of talking to us about how sophisticated search and rescue operations are now. And that really that sophistication didn't start happening until probably the 70s. Now we're going all the way back to the 30s. So yeah, they have a lot of manpower out in the woods, but the Civilian Conservation Corps, you got to remember what that was. That basically was a group of unemployed, unmarried men that couldn't find work. So the government basically said, come with us. We need trails made. We need, logs cut. We need all this work done out, in the national parks, and we'll pay you guys. These people are not trained in search and rescue.
So it's like less of like, look at it as manpower covering the area, more of like aimless wandering of a giant crowd.
Yeah, I would say, it's more compared to
like, I don't want to like take a hit on these people because they're out there doing it. Like, I'm sure they're trying their best, but you still need organization. You can't just drop a bunch of people in an area and say, go nuts. You want to make sure that like someone's with a map doing your grid pattern to say, okay, this area was searched by team this. Now this team move a mile west, and you have this communication that it's a big consorted effort of like teams going on the ground and teams watching the map and all this coordination. And they had just got shortwave radio.
So they really have no technology. There's no one in the sky, no airplanes surveying the area. They've got, 150 guys that are not skilled in search and rescue. I don't even at this time in the 30s, search and rescue really wasn't, it wasn't
not a thing at all.
It wasn't a thing at all. It was just people. If someone went missing, they would get a bunch of people together. They go out in the woods and they'd, stomp around and look. And if you got lucky, you would maybe find the remains or find them.
Kind of like before fire departments, they just had bucket brigades, like make a line and carry water, like in a line. And that's like how they fought fires, like how they've searched people is someone's missing, get the word out, and everyone show up at this spot.
And so the one thing they did have was bloodhounds from the local jail. But again, when we talked to the search and rescue officer from Colorado, he said, if the area gets contaminated before they bring the bloodhounds in, there's no way those dogs are going to be able to get a sense of this kid.
Which maybe 150 dudes trampling around the woods might just do that.
Exactly. So in modern search and rescue operations, one of the things they do is they make sure not to disturb the search area before they get these canines in there, because they need, a bunch of people stomping around, disturbing the ground, leaving scent all over the place. It's going to be harder for those dogs to track. And I just can't imagine back in the 30s, they probably just brought the dogs in. They're like, all right, let's just, here's this. They probably gave like a sock or something and like sent them off. So there was probably.
So now you just turn around my whole like excited, like, wow, they amassed all these people to like, wait, they blew it.
No, I still think it's impressive. Yeah, I still think it's impressive that they were able to, get that many people out into the woods in such a short time period to start, like they always say, the first 12 hours, first 24 hours in a missing person case is probably the most important and vital, especially if you're trying to find someone still alive. So the fact that they were able to get those people out there that fast.
And I will say it a million times. I don't care if people are sick of me saying it. He was 4 years old. How far could they have gone? Yep. And that's also, I think, plays credence into the drowning and swept away by the river, because if he wasn't in the river, even if they're doing it wrong in that short window with that many people in that small of an area, they should have been able to find him. The thing that throws me off is like the things they did to the river that they would never do today, even if someone was missing, because of like disturbing the like ecosystem. Like they shut entire rivers off and diverted rivers and dragged them, and they're pulling crap out. That still shocks me that they weren't even to find him then. Because even when he conducted his test, it's not like they were doing all that stuff again. Like, they couldn't find the sack. It's probably at the bottom of the river somewhere to this day. Like there's some sack sitting there, like in the current. But I mean, they were diverting rivers, draining things out, dragging everything and trying to find, and they didn't come up with anything. So that really got me too, is did this kid like did his body end up in some strainer point that was so deep or so like in the spot that just no one found it?
Yeah, I honestly think drowning is probably the most logical explanation. I would say the second explanation would be maybe an animal attack. But with
that's what I was thinking too, like a mountain lion or something, because the size of him and him being by himself. I mean,
there's bears in the park too, so that many people stomping around that quickly, I think you would have seen.
Yeah, and they would have scared them all off. I mean, let's be honest, they would have
scared them off, or they would have seen the remains, or they would have seen signs of an animal attack that fast. It was summer. There was no snow on the ground, so I think an animal attack, while not likely, is still, I think, in the mix for what could have happened.
Yeah, it's possible, but highly unlikely compared to what was happening.
I'm going to rule out.
So what are your thoughts on that? The hiking couple that saw the boy at Devil's Nest?
I honestly think, because it's happened to me. You're out in the woods. You've been hiking all day. You're tired. You might be a little dehydrated.
You just see kids crying.
You're up at elevation. Not necessarily.
I know.
Yeah, I think you sometimes even hear stuff that isn't really there. I still think they probably heard a bird or maybe it was some type of rodent or something making a noise up there. And I mean, even rock formations at a distance look like.
Well, and that's why I said I'd love to know, and I couldn't find if they saw him at like dusk or at a point in the day where it's low light. Because as soon as light gets just a little bit, like as soon as the sun goes down just a tiny bit, you start seeing all sorts of stuff. And
isn't that called confirmation bias, or what's the term? These people knew this kid was missing, so you're kind of looking.
Yeah,
you're kind of looking for it.
It's like a red herring almost. Like they heard about the kid and they're also in the area, and they're like, oh, "Is that a kid up there?"
I'm sure we'll get an email letting us know
that we said the wrong, whatever the heck it is.
What I think maybe these people.
Hold on, Mike. I think you were right. Nobody can yell at you. Confirmation bias, the tendency to interpret new evidence as confirmation of one's existing beliefs or theories.
There you go. I knew it was.
I could skew that to be the thing that you said.
So I think it's plausible to think these people knew Alfred was hiking in the area and went missing. They're out there. Let's assume, because we don't know, so let's just assume it's later in the day. They've been hiking all day. They hear this noise of what is probably an animal, and they see something off in the distance. Maybe it's a rock formation or a fallen log or something, and they mistake it for Alfred. Because how could you climb up there and not find anything from him? I mean, if, like you said, a 4-year-old, first of all, how did a 4-year-old get up there?
Yeah, and if he's going to run away, is he going to be making noise still or whatever? If he's
up there somehow, he's not going anywhere. He would still be up there as soon as they climbed to find him. And if he was dragged up there by an animal, you would find blood or some type of evidence that an animal dragged him up there. So I think those people didn't actually see him.
Okay. I think I'm with you on that one. I think he
drowned. I think, unfortunately, They were bathing in the river, and he was probably, the dad was fine because he's a full grown adult, but I think the river was probably too strong for a toddler.
Well, and it's probably, I'm just trying to picture like they both got out and said he wanted to go back in the river, and he's like, oh, run up by William or run up there and go with
Yeah.
those guys. And instead of walking them there and saying, hey, is it okay if I leave Alfred with you and getting confirmation? He just went back to camp and saw his son running towards him, thinking, oh, why wouldn't he go right there? Maybe he just went right back in the river in the same spot where he just was with his dad.
Yeah.
And then got swept away there. So because that's the thing too, the other guys came back to camp and it was like they had no idea Alfred was even there.
Yeah.
So like that tends to tell me that Alfred never even went by them because they wouldn't leave him alone.
No, and I'm
them.
going to rule out, I don't think kidnapping is.
I agree. I don't think there's enough people in the park.
No, and I think the probability of him drowning is so high that I just don't see kidnapping, even though we had that hoax letter. I just can't see that being a real possibility.
Yeah, especially because in the newspaper clippings, you have the mom and the dad saying that they think it's kidnapping. So you just have some sick bastard just in town like, you know what? All right, it is. I'm going to send a letter to the parents and say I have him and try and extort them for money, which is awful, but there's some sick people out there. So
you got to remember too, this was, the Great Depression was still going on. People were, hard for money. Probably 1938. I mean, the Great Depression had been going on for a while. People are probably desperate to get money any way possible. I mean, this guy maybe who wrote the hoax letter probably, maybe it was as innocent as like, I just need to get food for my family. I don't care how I do it now. I just need the money. So, I mean,
think that plays I think that plays a factor in it. All right. I think I'm with you. I think this is unanimous. I think it's unanimous for you, I, and the official theory. I think it's clear-cut drowning, and they just unfortunately could not recover the body.
Yeah, I think because of a lack of, skilled search and rescue people at the time, I think that hindered their ability to locate evidence or the remains. Not to say that a team, a SAR operation could find the boy's body now, but I just feel like with the technology we have available now and the fact that we have actual volunteers and paid search and rescue people that are trained to do this is what they do. That would lead to a better outcome today. So,
no, I'm in complete agreement. I think I am. I think it's drowning, and unfortunately, they just never got closure with recovering the body.